Good evening. I am Pete, also known as at Risk for Rewards on Twitter. Currently got just under 14,000 followers over there, and we've got about 800 subscribers here on YouTube. If you're not following here on YouTube, if you click the link at the bottom, you can subscribe. Just means you'll get all the content. You'll get a notification as soon as any videos go live. There's going to be plenty of video content, as I've expressed over the last few days with the lead up to the Cheltenham Festival. Video content will come first, and then written content will come up on Twitter. There may be plenty of videos without any sort of written content just because it's so much quicker for me to be able to do. So this is episode 3 of 5, or video 3 of 5. We've so far had a few festival tips to try and help you find your way to a couple of winners. We've had day one, so Tuesday's, all of Tuesday's early thoughts and analysis across the 7 races. And today we're doing Wednesdays. So originally I did say that this was going to be out today, and then I said on the last video it will be out on Sunday. But then I realised that many people may only have the weekend to watch videos, so it makes sense to release it tonight, especially as the racing this weekend isn't really that great anyway. So this is just going to be a general run through of all of the races on Wednesday's card, a few initial thoughts, any sort of bets that I've already had, anything I'm thinking of, and anything to watch out for that the market may reflect if a horse was to go non-runner, or if you get any sort of news, how you might want to play your bets, or what horses you may want to look at back in on the way. So without any further ado, let's go straight into the first race of the day. So the first race of the day is one that most people will be excited about because, much like the Supreme, it's got so many talking points, and it is the Ballymore Novices Hurdle. So I've already covered plenty of these runners in the Supreme. So those that I've covered in the Supreme, you'll have to watch the Supreme Novices video, which is obviously Tuesday's selection that was out yesterday. Today I'm going to cover the ones I didn't mention in the Ballymore. So first up, we've got Hermes Allen. Hermes Allen's looked pretty much unblemished with his reputation so far. Many were questioning when he went to Stratford. They put the headgear on and he was a hefty price tag. Everyone was getting a bit concerned about the fact of why on earth is a horse with such big connections going to such a low-key track and having headgear first time out? Maybe he's not quite what they hoped he would be already before he's even made the track. He did the job at Stratford, winning by probably 8 lengths. Was impressive, but at the same time, it was Stratford. It's not even a track that Nichols would normally target. You'd expect him to be at somewhere like Wincanton or Exeter, a bit more local. It was almost like they found somewhere really out of the way in the low-key race to get him introduced. So it wasn't that impressive. And then so he went to Cheltenham for the I think it was the October meeting or potentially the November meeting. And in that race, he met a few better horses. So that's where he met the likes of We've All Been Caught, Hardor, and he was sent off he ended up being backed into the 11-4 favourite. Went off in front, and he just never looked back. His sectionals came back good, the times come back good, and his jumping was impeccable. He was just exactly the same. I'd tell you, I wouldn't say the same. I think he's better as a hurdler. I think he's much better than Brave Man's Game at jumping a hurdle. He's just electric. He's very quick. He's swift. He's nimble. He travels well behind the bridle. And he put him to bed. What was in behind? The likes of Music Drive, not really any sort of world beaters. We've All Been Caught didn't look great on the day, but then came out and won the trial at Cheltenham in January. So everyone was thinking, hang on, that form's actually not too bad. And obviously since went to Dublin Race Festival, unfortunately bombed out, but I don't think that was his running whatsoever. So I think that horse does have some substance to his form, especially with the horse that We've All Been Caught, who finished in second, beat Pembroke of Dan Skelton's when he was sent off a short price favourite. So there is substance in behind. And then went on to the Challow. So went to the Challow Hurdle. The downside of this for the Ballymore perspective is Challow Hurdle winners are 0 for 18. So we came here again. This is the same route with Brave Man's Game where everyone was like, well, maybe he's one better. But could he be? Maybe. He went to the Challow, and again, all the doubts started creeping in. I think it was about anti-post is about 6-4. Got backed into even money, drifted out to about 2-1. Sat about 7-4 prior to the race, and it was horrible conditions there. Very wet, very horrible, and everyone was wondering: is he going to stay? Will he handle the ground? Is he as good as the other horses in the race? There's many horses going in there unbeaten, and again, it was just a rinse and repeat of Cheltenham. He just completely went out in front. And the rest, there were horses being pulled up. There were horses that couldn't handle the speed, the pace. And even in play, he was still odds against for the majority of the race because people just thought he'd gone off and he was going to get caught and that he wasn't going to be able to hold up what he was doing. But he doesn't go off extreme. He's not like a Willie Mullins strong novice hurdler where he goes off and bolts off and he's like really hard on the bridle. He just travelled as a normal horse, but he's jumping so quick and swift through the air. It just gives him every chance of maintaining his lead, and that's exactly what he did. The horse that finished second, She Wears It Well, won yesterday. Not a fantastic race, but it was a Group 2 all the same at Sandown, so that's a form boost. And there's plenty of form boosts in behind. So the horses that did finish that race, there's winners that have come out of that race already. So Hermes Allen goes there as a 3-1 shot. Obviously, we're on, fortunately, those who follow on Twitter, we're on at 18-1 because I put up to win the race, to win the Challow and then to win here at the Ballymore. And that was 18-1 for the double. So we've got that price, which is brilliant, locked in. 3-1 here. I could easily see him being the same as Braveman's game did and going off maybe 3-4-1 on the day. If there's going to be a market mover, I'll expect it to come from one of the Irish horses, especially as they're 6 for 7 in this race, rather than it's come from Hermes Allen himself. Does he have a chance? Yeah, he's got a brilliant chance. The only consideration that everyone, even including the yard, no doubt, they always go there thinking we've got a good one, but they always bump into one. And even the yard would say that. They don't understand why and then they come out over fences and you get the likes of Braveman's game, they turn into brilliant horses. And they are brilliant horses, but for whatever reason, they just bump into one that's either better trained or improves £10 for turning up at the track. So Hermes Allen, favourites chance, wouldn't put anyone off it, but I just don't see the point unless this race cuts up or there's a few strong non-runners. But then Mullins will probably just switch ones from the Supreme. There's no real rush because I could see him being the unsexy, shallow hurdles don't win this. He'll be the drifter on the day. Moving on to the next in the market is the 9-2 second favourite, which is Impere Pass. So Impere Pass is obviously a very interesting horse in the fact that very unexposed, bolted up in December around the New Year's period when everyone was watching racing elsewhere. This one went completely under the radar. The sectionals and the times didn't, and he was so impressive in the finish when he gave the nudge and he was gone. And that is very much the way the Ballymore's ran. It's very strong. People get very mixed up because of the fact that the Supreme's over 2 miles. People think that you need to be able to quicken off this fast pace and do all of this, but the Supreme is almost like a 5 furlong sprint. They go hard and fast and they just try and maintain that, and you need stamina to win the Supreme. Whereas on the Ballymore, what they do is they go a slightly slower pace, but they quicken off that pace. And as the race begins to tick along, they get faster and faster, and then it's who's got the fastest turn of foot. They're very different races, and it's actually the opposite. Whereas if you looked at it and knew nothing about horse racing, so Impere Pass on debut looked exactly that sort of type. He quickened off a very average sort of pace, and he went away and he put lengths very quickly between himself and the field. Stepped into the Moscow Fly, he went backwards in trip down to 2 miles. So problem is with that was it was just there was not many runners. The Model Kingdom was in there, who's a fair yardstick, but is no world beater. And they crawled around, and then they started to pick up the pace. It was a bit of a mess of a race, but all we learnt was he could still jump well. He could jump well at a faster pace, which is obviously 2 miles, so we learnt from that. And he quickened off the pace and he won well, going away and winning 5 lengths plus. So you've got a bit of a form line from each. He comes in with 2 runs, so generally he hasn't got an awful lot of experience. So he's a bit like an El Fabiola, like as an El Fabiola last year, is that he could get caught out by one who's a bit more experienced, a bit more battle hardened if this ended up going into a scrap. But at the same time, he's had no issues with his jumping, and he's a very uncomplicated horse. He looked a brilliant ride, and it would not surprise me if he's one of those that comes for money on the day. 9-2, completely fair at the moment, and obviously we don't know what's going to happen with the market. I could see him going off favourite. So if you are a big fan of his, you may want to back him, but at the same time, for me personally, looking at the markets, the way it's fairly competitive here, I'd imagine this will probably be 3 or 4 to 1 in the field. And you're not 100% sure. Obviously, you can get non-runner no bet. You're not 100% sure who's going to go where. And in reality, the bottom line is jockey bookings. If Paul Townend turns around and says he wants to ride Gaelic Warrior or Champ Kylie, doesn't matter who the best horse is in the race, Impere Pass will not go off shorter than what Townend is riding. Or if he does, the original prices will drift out and then he'll get backed in on the day. Like if Impere Pass, obviously if he chose Gaelic Warrior, the money would come for Gaelic Warrior because that was his choice. Impere Pass would drift, and Daryl Jacobs just as able as Paul Townend. Or I'm not going to say just as able because Paul Townend is a very good jockey, but so is Daryl Jacobs. He's more than capable, is what I was trying to say. So a lot will come down to jockey bookings with the price of this race, especially as Mullins has got so many in here. Going on to his next run, he got Gaelic Warrior. This horse is a bit of a conundrum for me because he got beat last year off 129 in the Boodles, and as we've seen since, the fact that he won off 143, so £14 higher in a much harder, much more competitive handicap, shows that he clearly was well handicapped on the day. But it tells you two things. One was maybe he needed the experience, so he wasn't really ready for that day, which isn't surprising because it was his first run for Willie Mullins. The second thing was the fact that he just he jumps right. It's a left-handed track at Cheltenham, and he jumps right. So he was given ground away. It wasn't spectacular amounts of ground until they went into the straight. If you stop the clock at the top of the hill, and you said, right, okay, they're turning into the bend. You've got Gaelic Warrior here. Let's go. And you're like, hang on a minute. You're like, this horse is just going to do it. And I've looked back and I've watched videos of the likes of Duvan and Vittor in these novice hurdles, and they hit that hill and then they just go away and they stretch clear further and further. And at that point, you would have said, take my money. This horse is going to win by however far he wants. But he continued to edge across the right, and then he jumped right at the second last, and he continued. And then Paul Towner made an active move to move him across the right to give him the rails the best chance. But he moved so far, and then he completely span us over to the right, off opening the door up. But the thing was, he was giving away small amounts of ground at each hurdle rather than spectacular amounts. And it just, by the time they got to the end, he'd just given away so much ground that he just couldn't make that back up. So he's coming into his he's had 3 hurdle starts this year. First 2, he's won by accumulated 100 lengths. Obviously, he jumped right the last couple of hurdles on his second to last start when he was well in control. But on his handicap, on the handicap that he won at the Dublin Racing Festival, he didn't jump. It was noticeable, but it wasn't like significant, and he was jumping fairly well throughout. But coming to that last, as soon as he hit the front, it was almost like in his head he's like, I've got 10 lengths clear of these, and he just jumped so remarkably out to his right. He opened the door to anything that was even half close handicap wise to just go straight up the inside, but obviously he had too much in hand. So the thing is, could he be a Group 1 horse? Yeah, he could well be, and he could be the best in this field. But the issue you're going to have is that depending on which side they come up, come up the rails. So if they take the left-hand side, if they peel him around the bend, and if they then go up the left-hand side, so hug that rail, he's going to be going off on his own, or he could end up going off on his own. If not, if they go up the right, that will benefit him if everyone's going across. But you've got no idea until they get there. Like the likes of Sir Gerhard, he came up the right-hand side last year, but he was on a solo on his own. So if you could have Gaelic Warrior going off, say he hit the front and he was going off on a solo, but then he's going to be giving away lengths all the way down that straight. So whilst I'm saying that he could definitely win, and he looks a Group 1 performer, a massive engine, but that would concern me. And I could just see it that you go to the last and you're up against, I don't know, Imperi Pass or Hermes Allen, and you go into the last, Gaelic Warriors are lengthening in front. He just says, jumps out to the right, gives away a couple of lengths, and the other horse wins. And then he's got the whole way up the straight to try and catch him. Like when you've got a horse like Brazil, which we've seen since, who is obviously well handicapped on the day, but has not turned into any sort of star, can get the better of him when he's on such a low mark. Like what's to say when he's in potential Group 1 horses here that these guys aren't going to be able to do exactly the same. Like I think in my opinion, he could have £5 to £10 in hand of what he's already shown. So I think he's the highest rated now. So maybe 151 or 153. But he's going to have at least probably £5 to £10 if he does that jumping out to the right. There's no guarantee he will, the way the race comes out and all of that. But I also remember them talking about steering Phalange with this, and they were like, "Oh, in this Supreme, we're going to tuck him in, and then hopefully he won't jump out wide." So what they did was they put him out in front, but they tucked the stablemate to one side. All Asterion Phalange did was he continued to jump out to the right, but in the end, he eventually just took his stablemate out, and they both went down. So I don't expect that from Gaelic Warrior because he's not a horse that looks like he's going to fall. But if he begins to jump out wide, like even the horses that are in the Mullins yard, so if Danny Mullins is on one or Darryl Jacobs on one and say Towner's on Gaelic Warrior, like there is no friendship outside, like whether you're in the same yard, they all want to win those races, whether it's for Mullins or whoever. So if he starts jumping out wide, they're going to come inside and say, see you later, take it away. So Gaelic Warrior, in summary for me, of course he could win this race, but it's so hard to put your money on it, and it's just I could just see him coming down to whether he's in contention or not, and like you just don't want your money on something. If he wins, so be it. But imagine coming down to the last, and you're like, oh, he's tanked through this race, and something comes alongside him, and he jumps out, and you've just thrown your race on such a big stage. So for me, it's got too many complications, but I do respect, and I do think he could be the best of these. I said this last year when he got beat, he will be a handicap blot, one that got away. but that does concern me big time. On to Goodland. So Goodland, very different profile. And if you listen to Barry Connell, there's no point even assessing the Ballymore runners because just lump on. So Supreme Novice Double and Ballymore, he says, I've got both of these races. They're both wrapped up. And everything he said so far, he's not been wrong. He's obviously won both of them to come in there unbeaten. So Goodland, much like Marine National, he's been slowly brought along and he's snuck in. I think Goodland's only had 2 runs over hurdles. So he's another one who's fairly unexposed but also lacks experience. But he has had experience in the deep end. So he won well going away from Tagman, beat him about 10 lengths. Very uncomplicated ride, very strong traveller, good jumper. Went to the DRF, stepped up to 2 miles 6 furlongs, and it was almost like a rinse and repeat. So the argument going into the DRF was that was the strongest race, and you had to back him to that. And again, looking at our anti-posts, congratulations to those that are on. Not that he'll make any odds if he doesn't win, but we're on, I think it was 36 to 1 we got for him to win at the DRF, the Nathaniel Lacey, and then also to win this race here, the Ballymore. And obviously he's 5s now. So that's 2 good plays at the front end of the market. The issue we got with Goodland is you don't know where his ceiling is. The Dublin Race Festival, he put it to bed nicely. He went to the front and he won going away. Problem was is once he hit the front, I hoped that he would just like, again, going back to like the proper novice hurdlers we love, like the Duvans. They hit the front, they go 2 lengths clear, and then bang, they're gone. Like in Perrier Pass on debut. Like you want to see that sort of thing. And he hit the front, and then he began to idle. So he could have got a bit lonely, but also the jockey could have been a bit wary of the fact that, hang on, in 6 weeks, we need to have this guy at 110%. I don't want to be smashing, pushing so hard. And it always felt like potentially one of the other horses behind was going to catch him because he was doing enough without going any further ahead. So, but I do think obviously that is one of, if not the strongest pieces of form going into this because he's beaten a lot of the best horses over that sort of trip. The only negative that I'd have with this is the fact that when you look back through the field, the horses that he had beaten in the end, like Absolute Notions and Sandor Clegane, they both look like 3 milers to me. And Absolute Notions obviously was staying on. He was 4th coming in and he ended up staying on very well. So they both look like 3 milers. And then the market leaders, you had Quaid de Paris, who got back 9 to 1 into 3 to 1 and was just a no-show. Travelled well, just disappeared out the back of the TV. And obviously Grange Clare West, another one, probably about 6 to 1 for the second time in a row, ran no race. So in reality, you're looking back through and you're like, well, what did he actually beat? He beat a couple of 3 milers. So this is me. Obviously, I'm doing this, even though I've got anti-post bets on, I'm trying to be as impartial as possible because people don't come here because they don't care about my anti-post bets if they're not on. They want to know what my thoughts are going forwards. So Goodland is very much, I put him in the exact same bracket as Marine National. He is so hard to weigh up because he has got, both of them have got some of the best Group 1 pieces of form. But where that stands against the likes of a Willie Mullins horses or the Paul Nicholls good jumper, like where that stands, I don't know. I wanted to see him do more in the finish, but at the same time, you cannot knock anything he's done. And again, his ceiling's limitless because he's won so far. So Goodland on the radar, but again at 5 to 1. Because he's the unsexy type, even if Barry Connell goes on ITV or whatever and says he's going to win, I still think there's a strong chance that he'll still be 5 to 1 or bigger on the day if this sort of field holds up. Because this field is littered with depth. Moving on to our next horse is last time out Group 1 winner, Champ Kylie, who sat here at 8 to 1. And people were thinking, hang on a minute, 8 to 1 for a Group 1 winner last time out of Willie Mullins, who's obviously got a great record in this race, and the Irish have won 6 of the last 7. Well, Champ Kylie's got a bit of an up and down sort of record. I think he came into it, they raced him in August, and he showed so much toe that they were like, hang on, maybe he's faster than we thought. So he put him back into the 2 miles. He went to the 2 mile Group 1 and he got beaten by Long and Bell, Marine National, Irish Point, Ashrow Diamond, and he just didn't have the pace for him. For whatever reason, they decided it was like they were trying to teach him something different. He didn't go off from the front. He raced in behind, and he didn't have the pace to quicken when they did come to the bend. But next time out, when he raced Irish Point again, who obviously had finished behind, he did have the pace, and he also led from the front, and he didn't stop. So they did have some hurdles omitted, so it wasn't like it was plain sailing, which always, well, in my opinion, it always benefits the front runners because it's hard to take someone who have obviously already gained 4 or 5 lengths because there's no way they're making a mistake. It's you're going to have to pass them with their stamina. So Champ Kylie he's been underplayed in the market, and again, another one that we're on. So we had him last time to win his Group 1. I can't remember off the top of my head what the race was, but he won it, and then obviously to win here, and that was at 50-1. So because he was 8-1 originally, and then he ended up getting sent off 10-3 to win that race, and he did win that race. So we've got him in the bag. Would I be telling anyone to back him at 8-1? No, not at the prices currently, because if if they're happy to have him at 8-1 now, he could well be again another that will be 8-1, or he could be a double figure like Lurker on the day. I don't know how this race is going to be run. I've got 4 weeks to work out and pace map and analyse to see how I think they're going to run, who's likely to front run. And once jockey bookings come out, it'll probably be a lot more apparent. I just don't think there's a rush. I just think Champ Kylie could get beaten by one of the more unexposed, the sexier types, the ones where you look and think that horse could win a Ballymore. Ballymore's a good trial for the Champion Hurdle. So like often you'll get a horse that could win here, and then there'll be a big player in the Champion Hurdle. And Champ Kylie strikes me as more of like a gritty, I got my Group 1, that was a job done, and he could finish in the places here. But at the same time, I just don't think, I think one or two may have that little bit extra. But at the same time, I'm happy with the anti-post. That's why you try and take those prices, so you've got him on side if he did run a blinder on the day. Onto In the Pocket. So In the Pocket's quite an interesting one, because again, another very unexposed horse. First time out, easy maiden winner, just like most of these. And then second time out, stepped into a much better, like a higher depth of racing when coming up against 3-Car Bragg, but travelled all over them. As in, I think it was a 6-runner race, and the front 3 were all very like well thought of horses. And he came to the front with 3-Car Bragg, and like Rachel was just holding a double handful in behind, and it was just like, how far can I win by? Finally got the gap, squeezed through and went through, and then, but again, a bit like the Goodland sort of situation. Once finding the gap, hitting the front, it's whether you think that horse is idling or whether that's as much as they've got. But then 3-Car Bragg started coming back at him towards the line, and that's when everyone was like, 3-Car Bragg's an Albert Bartlett horse, get him up to 3 miles. That's definitely the case, and brought that 2 lengths that they scooted clear on In the Pocket back to more like a neck, and I think it was a neck, the final victory over them. So whilst you respect that, is how much does In the Pocket have? So they then went to the DRF. The DRF was obviously the absolute mess of a race. They dropped back to 2 miles to take on Facile Vega. Facile Vega and High Definition had their own race, blew their own chances and went out the door. This horse sat with the, not Impere Pass, the Supreme horse. Give me 2 seconds. I know you're probably all screaming it at me. Ilite Tomps. So sat with Ilite Tomps. But at the time, Danny Mullins was on cloud 9, and Rachel was like, hang on, these two have got quite a bit away, and she became a bit wary, so she began to move forwards, whereas Danny just said, no, I'm going to hold off on Elite Tom. And she didn't really suffer from the burn-up, but just a much better horse on the day, and Elite Tom skipped past and won by 9 lengths. But at the same time, the beating of the other horses was a career best, and it also looked like on the day that it just didn't have the pace of the 2 miles. It was just unexposed at that trip, and just thought, do you know what, definitely a 2-mile 4 horse, which is what the connections would have wanted to work out. Is this a Supreme horse, or is this a, because it still beat good horses like Dark Raven, who's very unexposed for Willie Mullins, which is no 4-line hope. So sat at 14 in the 14-1, it's not a bad price, but I've tried to have a scan around, and I've got no confirmation to know where they're definitely going. And again, this race is quite littered with depth at the front end of the market, and as I said, it'd probably be 3-1 or 4-1 the field, so I don't think there's a rush. But I think if you're sat on a docket for In the Pocket, I definitely wouldn't be put off with what I've seen so far, just because of the way the horse travels and jumps and doesn't make any mistakes. Very uncomplicated ride, and only been beaten by a 2-miler who put in a career best, and that was a career best for In the Pocket. So in summary of these, there is not a lot between them, but at the moment, currently, I think you're best just sitting on your hands. And if you're on any of those at the front end of the market, I wouldn't put you off any of them. I wouldn't be sat there disappointed thinking, oh, I'm on Champ Kylie, I don't think he can win, or Gaelic Warrior. I think there's going to be a very close race, and a lot could come down to ground, jockey bookings, what horses actually end up taking place, where you end up positioning the race. Like a horse like Gaelic Warrior, you don't want to be on the wrong side of him, stuff like that. So it's going to be a very interesting race, and I will go into it in an awful lot more depth close to the time. I'll have full analysis, sectionals, look through all the times, look at the stats and everything. But at the moment, we don't want to go too in depth, Because if I go and look at a horse and say I became so set on Goodland and blah blah blah, you just become blinkered, and all you think is that Goodland will win. And then when you start looking at things a lot closer to the time, you've become blinkered. You've backed one horse, and you just forget about the rest, and then it stares you in the face. So this is just a brief overview. Um, Onto the Brown Advisory. So Brown Advisory is a race that everyone has said is so weak all year round, pretty much. Everyone's been complaining for years that we've got like the likes of complaining for years that everyone's like, oh, we get an odds-on favourite like a Monkfish or whatever, comes along and it's a non-event because they go and bolt up. So this year we've got the opposite in the fact that we don't have a Monkfish. We've got a wide open field and it's competitive as they come in reality, um, because there is no standout. I'll start from the top end, like they're talking about with Galia de Lato, her coming here. Um, Thunder Rock's still a player. The Devil's Coachman just beat Ramillies over 3 miles. Stage Star just won a big handicap, and so they want to put him into a group performance. James de Burley's out to 20 to 1 after a no-show, but could just get thrown in here as a long shot. Mighty Potter's going to the Turners. Ramillies could come here, but could end up going to the National Hunt Chase. So I think this would be a better chance for him, just because I think this trip would suit better. Galia de Mesnil, obviously, I think personally will end up in the National Hunt Chase, and obviously I covered him quite in depth yesterday along with Ramillies. Sir Gerhard, 7 to 1. So we'll start here. Me personally, and this is my hunch, this isn't me with any sort of information, and obviously we've all heard what Willie said. I think he's more likely to go to the Turners still. I know at the start of the season I backed him for the Turners, but I completely threw that, like as in my head, I'd thrown that slip in the bin, and I haven't brought it back from the bin because it wasn't like I got mega excited when he came back. I think going off all his form that he had last year was all over 2 miles, including his win at the Dublin Race Festival. He stepped up to 2 mile 4 because obviously they needed to run Dysart Dynamo in the 2 miles, and he went off joint favourite with Constitution Hill. So he took the Ballymore with ease. He then flopped at the festival at the end of the year when beaten by Mighty Potter. That was the last run we'd seen of him. So the theory was surely he'll come back 2 mile 4. He's not an Arkle horse, and then he'll go over fences. But he got linked to almost every single race under the sun. Mullins saying that he could be a champion hurdle horse, and everyone didn't know whether he was going to end up coming out and going over hurdles or what he was going to end up doing. And they've waited so long. Obviously, he's clearly had plenty of issues. But it was interesting. They've obviously had him out and they've put him over the fences. So now he's lost his novice status. So they need to swing the dice, because otherwise next year, if he comes back and he's still over fences, he's not going to have a novice season. So he will be up against the big boys in open company with 1-2 runs under his belt. However, obviously I have not got any stats, but there cannot be many runners that have got, I think, listening the other day, I think there's maybe 1 or 2 horses that have come and won a race at Cheltenham Festival with 1 run under his belt. So Willie said Brown Advisory will be the race for him because of the fact that he said it could be the longer trip, but with more to jump, but it might suit him. But me personally, he's gone from 2 miles. Why is he suddenly going to go up to 3 miles? So I still think that the 2 mile 4 would suit him better. It just depends what Mullins decides to run in the race. Obviously today we're not covering the 2 mile 4, but it's just my brief overview. Does he have a chance in the 3 miles? Not on obviously stats and stuff like that, but we all know his class, and we all know he'll be much better than what he was on debut, like when he was a bit sketchy. But it's one of those, you're rolling a dice really. So on to the 3 market leaders, where in reality, looking at this market at the moment, despite there being quite a lot of runners, this looks like the 3 main contenders. So you've got Time Hill, who literally just like Sir Gerhard, on so many stats, does not have a chance in hell. The issue is for him is the fact that most Brown Advisory winners will have 1 run over hurdles and then they'll come over fences. So it'd be like when he finished 3rd in the Albert Bartlett coming in the next season, and he'd have a leading chance. He would have been a major contender. He obviously hasn't. He's had 3 years, if I remember rightly, of which he's been placed in stayers hurdles. He's won massive events like the Long Walk, and he has dined at the top table over 3 miles. The downside of it is obviously he's a lot older now, so he's a 9-year-old, and he's come he's took to the game late. On Chasing Debut, I thought he was pretty good. He was okay. He beat 2 horses that he should have beat. The time out after that was awful. It was a painful watch watching him against McFabulous. He didn't raise a gallop. He didn't. Well, I say he didn't raise a gallop. He did travel. He just could not jump any of the fences. Like every single fence that came to him, it just seemed to be a huge struggle. He just couldn't jump. It was like he'd never done it before. He looked like a novice, which is obviously what he was supposed to. But sometimes when you see a horse put in a clear round and then they do it the second time out, it's kind of unexpected. And McFabulous put him to bed pretty easily. And we know McFabulous isn't the most consistent. And it was almost painful. It was like if they took all the fences out, he probably would have beat McFabulous. He was travelling well in between, and then he was coming to a fence and he was like scared of it. He was jumping it awkwardly. He was jumping like the old-fashioned snooker table. But then he was completely different at Kempton. There was nothing spectacular about his jumping, but he was doing enough that he was getting from A to B without losing ground. So he was either maintaining the same sort of distance that he was before, or he was gaining ground on his rivals. So either way, he was a much better already without the fact of obviously he's a 3 mile top level horse. So he was gaining ground, and then he picked up McFabulous and threw him away like he was nothing and like a piece of work, and he won very easily. There was much talk about him going to this meeting at Ascot tomorrow, but in the past, due to the weather, it's been bottomless because obviously we don't normally have good conditions. It's normally quite heavy this time of year, so the stats don't add up very well. But he probably could have got away with having a run here. But at the same time, he goes very, very well fresh. He's got a good record fresh. We know he's got the best hurdle form of all of these over 3 miles. It just depends on his jumping on the day. Obviously, he had I'm sure it was cheap pieces he had on the day. And they really sorted him out, straightened his jumping, and his best jumps were his last 3 coming down that home straight. And if he runs to that level, then he's got a chance. The issue is you just can't put your full trust on him. Again, another one that we've got on the anti-post, so we've got on him at 22 to 1. I mean, you could have had any price after he blew out against McFabulous, and he's into 6s. Like 6s is not a price I'd want to take. Like he could win, and you could have a cover bet or whatever on him. I would not want to be having 6s. I'd want double figures, just because in the current field size that we've got there, like if he's there, bang there, like 2 out or whatever, then brilliant, because you know he's going to stay. But the problem is how's he going to take those last? Is he going to go to the second last and proper gun it, jump through it, and then keep running and then run all the way up to the line like a proper chaser that just wants it? And I'm just not 100% on that, which is again why we've got time to think, look, rewatch the races in the next few weeks. But it's not a price I'd want to take at 6s. But that does lead me straight onto the favourite, Jerry Colombe, who is a horse I like. I've backed him at 5 to 2 in the last few weeks, and I'm running no bet because he's the opposite. Like he's got an unblemished career so far in the fact he hasn't faced defeat, and chasing was always going to be the game, but also 3 mile chasing. But what really, really liked about Jerry was the fact that on his last start at Sandown, he looked outpaced and well beaten at 2 mile 4 furlongs. Not well beaten, but he looked in trouble. But once he got stuck into him, when Jordan Gameford pushed into him, it was like, is he going to find anything? And he did find something. But it wasn't just that. It was the fact that when he came to the fences and coming down at Sandown, they're not easy fences to navigate. And he came and he threw everything at it. Horse and jockey, it was one of those like one arm holding the reins, the other one pushing him along. And it was like bang, straight over the next one, then bang. And he put the race to bed. And that's the sort of horse that I want in the Brown Advisory coming down the hill. There could be other horses that travel better. There are other horses that are just generally better. They might bump into one. But I want a horse that's got that sort of attitude. And he's one that a lot will depend on the ground. I think the softer the ground goes, the shorter Heel's price will begin to get. But currently at 5 to 2, I think that's fair. I don't see him like I don't see how he's going to suddenly be like wake up on the Monday morning of the festival and he's suddenly going to be 4 to 1. I think 5 to 2 is more than fair, and obviously he's ran in 2 good races. He's been running at 2 mile 4. I think the step up and trip is sure to suit, and I think he's definitely. And well, the final horse is the Real Whacker, and the Real Whacker is a complete conundrum. Like as in, he is everything that you'd want in an old school Brown Advisory winner. And what I mean by that is, these used to be battle-hardened horses that have done 7 or 8 runs in the season. They've come up against each other. They're not coming here unbeaten. They've all beat each other. They've got so much experience in both in jumping and in the battles. But in recent years, these races have broken up to less than 10 runners, and it's become a lot less. It's nothing like those sort of old school sort of races. So the Real Whacker has won the two of the big trials. The first one he won was over 2 mile 4, and on that day he beat. And then on the 3 mile one he won next time was against Indigo Breeze. So Indigo Breeze was the horse that I backed at the DRF, thinking that he must have at least £14 in hand, because the Real Whacker obviously just got the better of him on level weights. The issue was there is that, in fact, no, that was the 2 mile 4, sorry. And then the issue was there is the fact, no, I have got that right. That was 3 miles. And then the issue was there is he ran no race, so I didn't really get to test that sort of form. I'm not going to knock him for it. And then obviously he's also, since then, he's beat horses like Montmoral. And that's just not real form that I would want coming into Brown Advisory. The only thing you can say is you can set your watch by him. He's going to front run, he's going to jump well, and if they get all their fractions right, he's going to be tough to catch. And he's what you'd call solid. If you want the each way, bang, on the money horse, 11-2, fill your boots, he would be the each way play, because he is. I find it hard to see him out of the three. He's going to run his race, but is he going to be as classy? Is he going to be a future Gold Cup? Well, Connection seem to think that he could possibly run in the Gold Cup this year, and they have had it on their mind as potential sort of thought process. But for me, I'd just be disappointed if something like Jerry Colombe doesn't lack the sort of class to beat the Real Whacker. But at the same time, he's as hardy as they come, and I haven't got anything to knock him with, bar the fact that I think the form's weak. I think the form, he beat a handicapper who showed nothing next time out, and then I can't remember who else was in the Montmoral race, but I remember it was so difficult to take him on that I looked through and I thought about backing the Real Whacker at 9-1, and it was just like, but I just didn't. I thought at least one of the front two in the market would have been able to. In fact, I'm going to find it just so that I can, because I just remember looking through thinking this is just not a good race whatsoever. And here it is, over 2 mile 4. So you had Montmoral, Thunder Rock, who did not jump well at all, and Beauport. So I mean, Montmoral's been beaten by almost everything this year, unfortunately. Thunder Rock can't put his jumping together, and then obviously Beauport, since his debut, has not really achieved anything since. So I think if you're backing the Real Whacker, you're backing it because he's got course and distance form. He's a brilliant jumper, and he's just a hardy horse. You know he's going to run his race. It's just if he bumps into something a little bit classier on the day, he is what I'd call solid. Onto the Coral Cup. I'm not going to flag any horses up in this right now. It's normally a good race for Nicky Henderson in the past, but we've got no weights. You're just literally just guessing, especially with the amount of time I've covered on the first two races. So let's try and speed it up a bit. And unfortunately, next is the Champion Chase. So this is really a conundrum. My gut says Blue Lord will go to the Ryanair, because they've now got Gentleman de Me and Enigmine. So they've got two horses in the first four in the betting. So I'm going to cancel him out, and he'll be on the Ryanair preview. That's not to say he definitely will, but I think I'd be confident that he will. Gentleman de Me is a horse I just dislike so much. He did me so badly at Aintree when I was sure, obviously, Edwardstone. It's one of the only times that he's ran below par. We didn't run below par, just Gentleman de Me was on a going day. He got the fast tracked, he got his summer looking, and he just pinged, and he was just on a going day. And much like he did with Blue Lord, he did exactly the same at the DRF. He was on a going day, they gave him too much rope, he jumped, he travelled, and he went winning a well. So to me personally, I think he'll go and do very similar. And it worked well for Enigmine because he'll know how far, in theory, he wants to be off him. So he'll be able to set his markers off the back of him. And it's also going to play into both Edwardstone and Enigmine's hands, because it means Editor de Jeet is not going to get a freebie out in front in any sort of way, because this horse is going to want to lead. So Editor de Jeet is an impeccable jumper, very good, solid jumper. It's very unlikely to see him fall. So these two are probably going to just jump out in front, and they're going to jump each other until one eventually says, I'll tuck him behind you, or they'll just keep going and going. Like Editor G doesn't seem to get lit up or phased by having another horse there, but that's not to say that it won't be different on this occasion. I think Gentleman will be a pester horse. I can't see him, like, I'm not saying he can't win, but he doesn't run two good races in a row. So it wouldn't surprise me if he ran here, was almost like a pacemaker, and then he ended up turning up at Aintree and did well at Aintree. Could he win? Of course he could. Will he have my money? Absolutely not, because you cannot trust him whatsoever. Editor de G is the dodging bullets of this race. So what I mean by this is the fact that every year, like, you'll get your Sprinter Sacras, your Edwardstones, your Enigmines, the classy horses that have got a few questions to answer because of a few issues they've had in that year. and then you'll get your editor de Gite, who literally has won all the trials. It's staring you right in your face to say, look, I've won everything. I've beat these horses already. Why do you doubt me again? And this is exactly the same again. He's 6-1, so he's obviously, well, 3 times the price of the favourite Energumene at 13-8, and you just think, well, sorry, more than 3 times the price, and you're just thinking, hang on a minute, am I being too stupid in the fact that this horse is clearly going to run his race again and play catch me if he can? Can he do it one more time? And the answer is he may well do it one more time. He's been consistent. He's looked very good the last 2. He's put the right numbers up. The biggest thing for me last time was the fact that Edwardstone headed him and he fought back and got the better of him again. So that meant that he obviously kept enough in reserve on that track in order to gain against him. So he is a massive player at 6-1. But because again, he's the unsexy connections. Come the day, he's probably going to be 6-1 or bigger anyway. The 2 at the front of the market, the only way that he wouldn't be that price is if Edwardstone was a non-runner. But it sounds like Alan King, it was like, oh, hiccup, not going to be an issue, but I just want to let you all know that we had a little bit of a problem, so he didn't work. I think of the front 2, when I first watched it, I thought Energumene, yeah, okay, he jumped so well, travelled so well, he was over racing, jumping into the back of horses, when in reality, you should have let him go a bit in order to catch the leader in the cooler part of the races, because by the time it got to the hot part, he was making up so much ground in the hardest part of the race. And coming to the last, him and Edwardstone were level, but you saw the difference in body language. Like Tom Cannon took a look across, and it was just like, well, I think I've got you cooked, sort of thing. And then Energumene absolutely spanned the last, went straight through it, and that was his race over. And I just feel like the combination of the hoodoo of Willie Mullins only got his first champion chase last year and broke that hoodoo. But there are so few horses that do back-to-back. In the last 20 years, the only horses that have done back-to-back are Masterminded and Altior. And you think Sprinter Sacre was in this generation, who was one of the best 2-milers. It took him 4 years to regain the title. Like, it's so difficult to be at that same top level, 2 years on the bounce, and be a top horse. So he does have that up against him. Whereas Arkle runners have a brilliant record in this race. I haven't got the numbers, but it's literally like 1-1-2-2, 1-1-1-1-1 for Edwardstone's chances. And I've got two flip sides for him. I think one is the fact that was a brilliant run last time out, and that he was very buzzy and a bit keen in the early stages. It was almost like if he'd had that Kempton run before, he would have been a lot more relaxed in this race. The other is the fact, well, hang on a minute, he's come back this year. He's put in an electric performance at Sandown. He's then thrown an absolute wobbly at Kempton, and then he's been beaten. So he's actually coming in with a 1 in 3 victories, and you're looking at a 2-1 shot. So it's very, very tough at the moment. Of the front 2 currently, obviously this isn't me, like, as in I'm not saying go and bet it, because we've got 4 weeks to think about this, but of the front 2, I think Edwardstone has the beating of Energumene now, just because he just looked like he had. The problem is, Edwardstone, they always seem to have an excuse. It's always like, oh, he was buzzy on the day, oh, he was that. And I think he still should have got past. When he got to Editor de Gite, despite whatever he's exhausted, and they got head to head, like, he's got to be going past that. He shouldn't be getting fended off. And that's what, then it brings me back around to Editor de Gite, and you're like, okay, 6-1, staring you in the face, much bigger price. You could back him each way. Unless Gentle to Me runs a screamer, he's not going to be out of the 3. So I've gone in such a loop with this. At one stage, I backed, my anti-post was Energumene was at 2-1 and Edwardstone at 7-2. So coupled, it paid just under evens. And I thought, well, that's an absolute golden price. And I'm not saying that those two might work out as an even money's coupled as the right play in the end. But obviously, Editor Gite coming into it, like it's just there's plenty to consider now. I don't think there's one, like, if you've got a strong opinion, say, oh, this is definitely winning, then fair play. But for me currently, it's going to be a lot of watching and working out, and like those negative stats against Energumene, the positives against Edwardstone, the fact that Editor Gite's beaten both of them. Like, there's so much to weigh up. So anyway, sorry about just pretty much clearing nothing up, just talking about the front few in the market. And obviously with the champion chases, you do get a few odd ones in the background, like who run a big race, but I cannot have the likes of Grenadine or Nubin Negro, who have had their chances many times in the past. Like, there's one thing saying a Special Tiara running the race 3 or 4 times. It's a bit different when you have a big flop like a Duvan and everyone's scared away, so there's very small runners. Like this has got, you'd have to have the front 4 all to flop for something like that to happen, in my opinion. Onto the cross country. So this is interesting at the moment because of the controversy of the last couple of days. So what I mean by this is the fact that last year I was one of the many that wouldn't believe that they'd run Delta Work against Tiger Roll. I saw the photos of him schooling. And I thought, yeah, maybe they'll do it, and then next year that'll be when they run him. Long and behold, that was not the case. The monsoon came, suited Delta Work. Tiger ran his heart out, but it just was in vain, just because of the fact that you're taking on a Gold Cup, an Irish Gold Cup winner on soft ground where stamina came into play, and it was close between them. However, the thing I can't get my head around is, like, Tiger Roll's form in this race over the last, I think it's 3 or 4 years. It was like 1-1-2-1. Yet Tiger would start every year at 8-1. Even the year that he won the cross country and Grand National, he was still like 6-1 to win the cross country. Whereas for whatever reason, like Delta Work and Tiger Roll pulled 20 lengths clear that day. But Delta Work, Tiger Roll's obviously been retired, and Delta Work's come back, and he was 2-1 at the start of the season, and he's now 11-10. I think he was 5-2 first price for the year after he won. Like, I mean, who's pricing that up? Like, yeah, of course he's got an absolute outstanding chance, but why was Tiger Roll? Either Tiger Roll was incorrectly priced every year, and it was a giveaway for the money, or Delta Work has been underpriced for this for months. Like, don't get me wrong, he has got the strongest credentials. That handicap race where he gave top weight, but he did jump. He was sticky at quite a few jumps. Obviously, it doesn't, like, when you're giving 2 stone away to horses, he would have finished in front of them anyway, regardless. Um, but I just think it's nothing to do with the horse, like just a complete price perspective. He was just priced wrong all year. He should not be that sort of price when you've got horses in the past. And just because he's done it once doesn't mean he's a certainty to do it the next year. However, obviously, I'm not saying he's not going to win, and he has got the best credentials. But what is interesting is obviously this week's news with Galvin. And obviously, I mentioned about the fact that Galvin had been seen schooling around the track with Gordon Elliott. Because obviously, last year I said Delta Work couldn't win because he didn't have any track experience. But long and behold, now we've seen that basically Gordon Elliott gets a open schooling session whenever he wants for his cross country horses. So he can go over there and he can send Galvin, Delta Work, and a couple of horses that he doesn't fancy, send them round, and obviously he can weigh up and say, right, okay, yeah, you do this, you do that, and they do get a feel for the track. So it's completely different to how it was in the past. And Delta Work was one of the, I think he's probably the first winner in 20 years to have gone there and won without having ever seen the cross country track. So that gives Galvin his chance this year. But obviously, I put the tweet up saying, here we go again. And it was interesting. So many people were like, oh, you're stupid. Oh, this, yeah, you don't know anything. This is like blah, blah, blah. And they were like, it's nothing like last year. I'm not being funny. Look, I have not had a single bet in this race. But if you don't think this is not like this, not like last year, I don't get what you're looking at. Because last year, Delta Work was an Irish Gold Cup winner, ran a couple of good races, was beginning to look past it, and was coming nowhere in all his races. Galvin, last year, sent off 10-3 for the Gold Cup, finished fourth, beat Aplutar, the Gold Cup winner in the Savills last year, top class form, returned this year, big win on return, put up a mark that was exactly the same as the mark that Delta Work won the cross country off last year, big run, and then his form's dropped off and he's tailed off and he's now going to have a 3 month break. So if he turns up here, there is literally, like, he's rated £10 higher than Delta Work. So if he turns up here, you can stand there and argue with me till you're blue in the face. They do have similar profiles. They couldn't be more similar profiles. The only difference is that Galvin enjoys good ground. Delta Work likes his best form comes, not best form, but he likes yielding or worse. So Galvin can handle the soft just like Delta Work can handle the good, but it's just their preferences. So if the ground came up rattling quick and you want to stand there and tell me that Galvin's got no chance and Delta Work's the one to be on, then fill your boots. But I'm not saying that Galvin's going to beat Delta Work. But if you're telling me that it's nothing like last year and Galvin doesn't have a chance and he's got no similar profile to what Delta Work is, then it's because you've backed Delta Work at a short price and you're just talking out of your pocket. The race hasn't even happened yet, so just chill down. Don't worry about it. Galvin might not even run. But people coming at me with like angry messages as if it was just forlong. He's nothing like. You're just wrong, plain simply wrong. They have got very similar profiles, and as I said, he is rated £10 higher than him currently. So, and again, he hasn't seen the track, which last year I'd say Galvin's got no chance. But as we know now, they school on the behind. Am I saying if you've backed Delta Work at 2-1 or whatever, you need to start covering on Galvin? Absolutely not. I just keep your bet as it is, and I just wait and see what happens. Does Galvin run? Do any of these horses run? Like some of the horses here we haven't seen at all this year, and then some of the others, so they've been running in the handicaps, but they've been getting 2 stone off the likes of Delta Work. Is Delta Work the most likely winner? Yes, 100%. Is 11-10 short? Yes. Is it going to get shorter? Quite possibly. I can't see a time when we wake up and Delta Work suddenly 2-1. So with this race currently at the moment, it's just a no bet for me. Just wait and see. But if you're sat there and you're thinking, I want to pile into Delta work like tomorrow or whatever, I always have that Galvin thought in the back of my head. And if you've already backed him, I'm not saying that like you, it's just a concern, just a thought, a horse you didn't need to have to be able to back. And if it was any other stable like a Nicky Henderson, you'd be like, well, they're not going to do that. But after what they did last year, it would not surprise me whatsoever. And obviously, Galvin's a previous festival winner also, just like the likes of Tiger Roll and Delta Work. So on to the Grand Annual. I'm not going to cover this in great depth. Just a couple of horses. So obviously, Orkin Risk was brilliant the other day in the Betfair Hurdle. We beat My Fancy for the county, Filey Bay. That was painful. The problem is with Orkin Risk is I thought if he goes to the Grand Annual on the same mark, then bang bang, off the front, go away from the front. You're clearly well handicapped. The issue is they've also gone in collateral. They've said they've marked it across with the Boot Hill form, but they've put him up £2 for his chase form, which to me is pretty sly. The fact that they've put him up, when they put his hurdles mark up, they put his chase mark up another £2, and his chase mark was already higher than his hurdles mark. So they're not giving a lot away. So he's an uncomplicated front runner, but I don't think he's as good chasing as he is at hurdling, and maybe he's had his chance. So he was top of my radar, but I'm just gone a little bit lukewarm, and obviously with his issues recently. So I'm going to wait and see with him. One that is quite interesting is Andy de Fresnay. Andy de Fresnay is currently rated over in Ireland £3 lower than what he ran off last year. He was well back last year. He had Mark Walsh in the saddle, and he ran at 10-3, and he finished second. It was the day where the monsoon happened, so it was like bottomless ground. He was held up, and he came through the pack late, and it would be one of those where people were just like, how have you left that so late? And he got all the way past, and he got past no other than champion chase horse Editor de Gite, back in the handicap days. Since then, he's ran no race at any point, which is why he's fallen all the way back down now, and he's £3 lower than what he ran off at Cheltenham. Obviously, by the time he gets his English tax, because obviously his form recently, he might only get a few pounds, so he's probably going to run off very similar to Mark to what he had last year, which he's currently priced at 16-1. If he was to run off another mark similar, if he was to run off around his mark last year, if he did get a bit of soft ground, and if he did get a claimer on, so like a £5 or £7 claimer, rather than Mark Walsh, then surely he has got to go close. But obviously, as you've heard with what I've just said there's a lot of if this, if that, if this. So he's just one to have in your notebook. Wait till you see what the Irish marks come out as to what he's going to get to run at Cheltenham with. Wait to hear in the stable tours to see if this is going to be the plan. Because obviously he's a JP horse, so the money may come just like it did last year. And wait to see if he's got a claimer. Obviously he'd have a huge chance if he had the stable number one on board. But if he's getting £5 or £7, that's him lower than what he was last year. And obviously if the ground's a little bit not firmer, but just not a monsoon, he could well be bang there to go again. Which I'd imagine this has clearly been the plan, which is why they've run no race to get that mark down. So, yeah, just one to have your thought on, just Andy de Fresnay. I haven't backed it myself, and I won't back it until a lot closer to the time. But I don't want to stand here and not say anything about all the handicaps. It's just a few that I've got on the radar. Obviously, I can't share all of them because otherwise I won't get the price first before I tell you them all. On to the Champion Bumper. So Champion Bumper is also known as the Willie Mullins and Gordon Elliott Benefit. Top of my head, I think it's something like in the last 7 run-ins, they've won, I think, all of them between them. Maybe Mullins 4, Elliott 3, something like that. Basically, it's an Irish benefit, in my opinion. Like I had many people ask me on Queen's Gamble what my opinions and thoughts were. And whilst I said it, and this was before what happened where she was beaten, whilst I respected it, the likes of like Fergal O'Brien and stuff, they get all their running done and their winning done away from the festival, even if it is at Cheltenham, to get the ticks in the boxes. They don't run they might run their best, but it's rare you're going to see something like that contend these champion bumpers. These champion bumper horses are won by horses that are like generally very expensively purchased, very expensively owned, and they're with the big yards. And in most recent years, it's been Elliott and Mullins, which is why, for me, I don't look any further than those two. Normally, we get like a Facile Vega or a Kilcruit or something like that coming into this. But we don't have that luxury this year. The talking horse so far has been It's For Me, who looked phenomenal. No disagreement whatsoever on debut. Just did everything, like blew your eyes out. And the sad thing was, it was a Twitter horse a few days before. it was 25 to 1, then 16s, then 12s, and then come the day, you were looking at just over double figures. It was quite skimpy. And then obviously, as soon as it won, you could see why. But the problem was, it was like, do you really want to take, like, I think it was boosted to 10 to 1. Do you want to take 10 to 1 on a horse to win the champion bumper who hadn't even ran yet? I mean, you could argue that there's people obviously who probably would now on certain horses. But at the same time, it was just the fact that it had already been 25s like 3 or 4 days before. So it, for me, has got outstanding claims. And I do think that obviously is the one to beat, but it's the one to beat based on one hurdle run and one set of form. All you've got is timings and sexuals off that. Like if you look 10 lengths back that day was Sutton Hill. So if I just get the form up here, take me 2 seconds. So Sutton's Hill. So Sutton's Hill finished 10 lengths behind that day. But another horse who Sutton Hill finished 6.5 lengths behind was Western Diego. So Western Diego had also had very good times, very good sectionals from the same yard, wasn't sent off a prohibitive price and bolted up on the day, beating the same horse, not a lot in it, but it sat there at 12 to 1. So my argument would be is, do I want to take a horse 3 or 4 times less? So if I was going to back one out of those two currently, like Western Diego, 12 to 1, okay, thanks. But at the same time, it's for me. Could I end up backing it on the day? Maybe. It might be boosted to 4 or 5 to 1. I might think, do you know what? They've took 4 or 5 of their other runners out. This is what I want to be on. But it's just not, at the moment, I've tried to go for bigger shots because that's what I like to do in the champion bumper. Because unless you're on at the big prices, like a lot of people got Facile Vega at 20 to 1, and that was brilliant last year, but it was sent off like something like, obviously it was into even money and then out to 15 to 8 on the day. But a lot of these runners, you don't know which way the price is going to go. That Dream to Share that won the DRF, that record of that bumper is brilliant. I think it's won something like three out of 4 or 3 out of 5 champion bumpers. But it was very low connections, but has been since purchased. I'm sure it's by JP McManus, which that tells me two things. The fact that they went in to buy a Dream to Share, obviously they think that that's a good horse, and the DRF, that's great form lines. I thought the bumper itself was very weak, but it also tells me how highly they obviously rate Factor File of JP McManus's, because they obviously expected that to do the business because that was Patrick's ride. And if they thought that was going to do the business, they thought, hang on, this horse is obviously good if to beat us. So it's interesting that they've purchased that horse. And obviously it has its chance. It had been off months, so to run to that level. But I do think that bumper, outside of Factor File and Dream to Share, was very, very weak at the DRF. Fun. 8 to 1. Patrick's horse, obviously, that he bred and did all the work with. Could end up coming here. But I have a slight inkling that they may well save her for Aintree and just let her hack up in the mare's bumper there. That's obviously my just gut feeling. I've got no evidence to base that on. I just think she's a mare. Patrick's going to think, well, I'd like to be on the best horse in the, like, as in who he thinks technically the best. So maybe an it's for me in the race. So the fun for fun side of it, he'd want to be on that horse as well. So he may well say, well, hang on, let's send her to the mare's bumper. I don't know that. I'm just completely guessing. There is only one champion bumper. At the end of the day, I just wouldn't be rushing it unless you're getting on one and no bet to go in on her in case she does reroute. Chapeau du Soleil. Jeez, what a nightmare this horse has been. So I, along with many, put this horse up at the start of the season at 16 to 1. It was a horse I had heard plenty about. Everything looked good. The Richie purchase, Willie Mullins, as I've mentioned, with the bumper record. And I thought everything ticks the boxes. All we need is a nice, uncomplicated debut. Unfortunately, did everything wrong you could possibly imagine on debut. Absolute nightmare run. Hit the front, pulled hard. The weather was bad. It was like rain, wind in the face. Ended up in the car park. Came back round and then once headed, then switched. Did everything impossible and then almost stayed on into second. And it was like everything you could ask for a horse to do wrong on its bumper. That's what that horse did. But the funny thing was the horse had already ran in a schooling bumper not long before and won. And so it wasn't like the horse was coming there with no form. It was just like for whatever reason on this day, he just had an absolute issue that was obviously you couldn't be helped. So what I was hoping was, okay, well, we'll get to see the horse out soon. He'll run in a bumper with more runners, fine cover, hack up, bolts up, job done. We're back in the game. Let's roll on to Cheltenham. However, the issue is we've only got one more week before, in reality, you'd want to see your horse out before the Cheltenham Festival. Like if they're not out, He's not entered this weekend, and if he's not out before, I think there's 4 opportunities next week. So you'd want to see him entered in one of those four meetings if they've got bumpers before the festival. If you're not, will he even go? The thing is, I don't know will he go, but at the same time, they're doing lots of bumpers and schooling races at home. Willie Mullins has made no secret of that, and we all know that they have their own big day out where they go and run all their horses and decide put the pecking order and stuff. So he will have been well schooled at home, but it's just worrying that when he did it on the track. So I'd like to see him go around in like a noddy bumper, but the closer it gets, the more you think, well, I don't want to see him go there anymore. So he's a bit like a Fernie Hollow who won the champion bumper, where he just was a bit mental on that first run. But Fernie Hollow did it a couple of times, so he could do it another time. The interesting thing with him is every time Patrick's asked about a bumper horse, he's not talking about it's for me. He's still talking about Chapeau du Soleil, and the market moves are remarkable. Like the start of this week, he was out to 12 to 1, and then just because I'm talking on this, I've got odds checker lined up, and for whatever reason today he's a sea of blue again, and he's back into sevens across the board, and mainly sevens, and in 2 places he's nines. Like they are obviously seeing things at home that he's doing that are very impressive. It's just, will he do it on the track, and will he be entered before? I hope he's entered next week somewhere. I've got no idea whether he will be or not. We'll have to wait and see. Obviously, I've backed him at 16 to 1, so it doesn't make any odds. It's not like if he doesn't run, then it's just a slip done. I've kind of accepted that that's what you do with anti-post bets. You're not going to sit there and cry about them or complain to people about them. As I said, Western Diego is an interesting one. The other horse that I do want to flag up to people is Did I Ask You That? So I put this up on one of my first YouTube videos at 33 to 1. And Did I Ask You That really, really caught, like as in eye popping, like bang, eyes out, on his debut, and he lost. What happened was he came around the bend, and it was the same race that Facile Vega had won over at Leopardstown. Came around the bend, scooted clear, went past a filly of Gordon Elliott's, or a mare of Gordon Elliott's, Paula Feliz or something like that. He went past her like she was stood still, giving her £7, hit the front, pulled like 8 lengths clear, hit the front, and then just pretty much stopped. He just was like plodding along, and then the mare got back up to beat him. So again, for the exact same reasons as before, the difference was he did everything right. He just went to the front too soon. But I was hoping that I'd see him out again to do the same again, but just perfect what he did, because it was very Facile Vega-esque to me. It was obviously never to that level, but in the way the move that he made, the way he swept past, and that horse was a good one of Elliott's, and was entered at the DRF in the big bumpers, and they decided to go straight to Cheltenham. And the way he went straight past her, like she stood still, giving him the weight, it was like, okay, we know what we've got here. We've got a huge engine. But it was interesting. Patrick's comments after the race was that they hadn't had the horse in long, as in literally a couple of weeks. So they sent it there just to see what they got. It almost sounded like it was like a schooling event. They'd done a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Let's go see what we've got under the bonnet. And they went there, and it was like, hang on a minute, we have got something under the bonnet. So, like, I'm not put off by him whatsoever about what and if he went straight there, I wouldn't be put off either. Obviously I don't need backing because I've already backed him at 33s, but he still sat there at 20s. Obviously you'd want the non-runner no bet, because you've got no reason not to take the non-runner no bet. And I'm still not put off by him. I just want to know, one, that he's going to the champion bumper. I wouldn't be bothered about him having a second run. I just wanted to see a second run just for a bit of a confidence booster, because I thought I would see more of like another big swooper move. See you later. But again, there's not a lot I can do. He's either entered next week or he won't be entered at all. But so just in summary, the 3 that I've got on the champion bumper that are heavy on my radar, obviously the favourite I completely respect, but I have missed the price, so I'm going to have to weigh up whether I want to, and a lot's going to depend if both of my runners that I've backed so far don't make it. Is that Chapeau du Soleil and Did I Ask You That? Both of those two, and Western Diego. So the 3 of them, they're all obviously Chapeau du Soleil's just under, is in the 7s at the moment, so you're not going to be taking that anyway. But the other 2, they're still in double figure prices. But I'm not saying back these right now, but just have them on your radar. If you see them entered next week, if you see them entered, you'll know about it because I'll put it up on Twitter. But it's just something for you to bear in mind. So again, this video is overran, so I apologise. I've had a lot of positive comments from all the videos, so I appreciate that, and I'm glad that you're all obviously enjoying them. I am just spitballing and throwing ideas out. So But I'm glad people are appreciating them and they do like the content. So in summary, the Ballymore's red hot. Wouldn't write off any of your tickets. And unless you're really strong on something, I don't think anything's going to be going anywhere from the top end of the market. So there's no rush to bet. The Brown Advisory, Jerry Colom, I think, is the one to beat, but the real whacker is the rock solid choice. But they have still mentioned the Gold Cup, so don't be surprised if they go elsewhere. Champion Chase, currently, obviously 4 weeks out. It could all change for me. Editor G is as I said, the dodging bullets of the race. It's one of those that's staring you right in the face, but you want to find something special or like perfect or like a this is going to win for like a really classy horse, if that makes sense. And Edward Stone and Enigamine have got a few question marks at the moment. Cross country, Delta Work, rightful favourite. I just question a little bit on his price, but the problem is I don't know if that's going to get any bigger. The news would be watching out for Galvin. If they say Galvin's definitely going to the race, that's when you need to start working out your play. If they say Galvin's definitely not going to the race, then in reality you've got to take the price on Delta Work because they're going to chop his price. And I look through the rest of the field just at the moment, and yeah, there will be contenders. There will be come the day like the likes of. Well, I look at this. There's loads of horses. I don't know if any of them are going to run, but something will run that will be a contender to him. But he has got plenty in hand with that course experience now. The Grand Annual, as I mentioned, keep an eye on Andy Dufresne's mark, but no reason to back him because he's not got a sexy profile due to the fact that he's been beaten for the last 12 months. And Champion Bumper, Chapeau du Soleil, and did I ask you that? See if they're entered next week. Wouldn't put me off if they're not, but I'd want to know that they're still on the Champion Bumper team. And the fact that the money, and he's blue again, Chapeau du Soleil, he's obviously doing something right at home still after that awful debut. Because if he was for any other yard or they weren't mentioning him, like you'd be well over 50 to 1 plus. Um, and obviously Western Diego as well. Just keep your eye out for that. So as mentioned, the blog is still live. So if you want, I had a few questions about my Andy post and a few things. If you go to my Twitter profile at Risk for Rewards, pinned to my profile is my Cheltenham Anti-Post blog, which has got all the bets that I've had over the last 12 months. So if you're wondering what I've actually placed and like any my early thoughts, they're already all lined on there. And it's also got stuff on there of like why I bet Anti-Post, different betting banks, and other things if you want to learn. Don't get me wrong, I know a lot of the people here that I'm talking to know a lot more than what I'm obviously laying on there. So, but and at the same time, obviously, if you can like or if you want to subscribe here on YouTube, that's brilliant. The next video won't be out till Sunday at least because I want to see what happens on the weekend in the Ascot Chase before starting to even try and contemplate discussing the Ryanair. So I hope you all have a good weekend and cheers.